all reach each other. But we're going to go ahead and get started now to make sure we keep on track. And we want to make sure our guests that we're staying within our time frame. So welcome back, everybody. We are now ready for our first session of the MBIA 2021 annual member meeting and workshops. And so we are honored to have with us today, Charles Ross. So I get to provide the introduction. So
fantastic.
Charles Ross, I actually looked it up since May 25th of 2010. That's when he and I connected on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Before that. So during all those years, I have seen him successfully lead the Advanced Technology Development Center at Georgia Tech, the Georgia Institute of Technology, and the Office of Economic and Community Development at Kennesaw State University. And I've also had the pleasure of serving with him on the board of directors of the International Business Innovation Association from 2011 until my term ended in 2015. And for over 25 years, Charles has provided organizations the strategic and tactical leadership needed to achieve breakthrough results. He has deep experience and expertise in technology commercialization, university-based economic development. Charles is currently the interim president and CEO at the International Business Innovation Association. And he is with us today to share his observations of business incubation and entrepreneurial support activities around the world. And with that, I welcome Charles, please. We're happy to have you with us today.
Oh, Sandra, thanks so much for that introduction. Appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to try to get some slides up here in a second. But before I do that, I just wanted to thank Sandra for the invite to share with everyone here in this particular meeting. It's really been a pleasure to work with you and Sandra. I was trying to think when I know we met before I connected with you on LinkedIn. I was probably still trying to get up into the social media. But I actually have just enjoyed really feeding off of your energy and your passion for entrepreneurial support. I really appreciate the support that you've given to MBIA. I also want to share with everybody here that the state of Michigan has a special place in my heart for sure. Number one, I have a couple of my board members that are from the state of Michigan, and Paul Reiser is actually on our executive committee and one of my 15 bosses. So that of course makes it special. But then when I think about just Michigan and many of the MBIA members that I've met over the years, I just really think about a collection of strong practitioners in the space. And I know that a lot of that is due to just the leadership and the commitment of the MBIA. And I know that that is tough work. And I know the compensation for that work is very low. And really appreciate all that you're doing to support your other colleagues in the industry. So since I came on board as the interim CEO and president back in like the summer of 2018, and one of the first events that I had a chance to attend was actually in Detroit, in the state of Michigan. And that was our eBuilders 2018 event, and that was a fantastic event. And then back in kind of that next spring, I guess I had a chance to attend one of the MEDC Smart Zone meetings. And so that was fantastic. And now a chance to join all of you here this morning. So been great interactions with the state of Michigan, really looking forward to our discussion. So I'm really excited because when I'm able to do this, I love being able to speak with members or potential members. And then really just to learn a little bit more from you, some of the challenges and opportunities that you're facing and how we can go about better serving those opportunities. So I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible. And so we're going to try to liberally use the chat function here for Zoom. But before I do that, for anybody who does not know about MBIA, MBIA has been around since '85. It's one of the largest networks of entrepreneurship centers across the globe. And the mission for MBIA is pretty simple. It's really just to help all of you here on this call just to be successful by connecting you to the people and resources that you need. And we look to do that by enabling connections in 5 buckets. So one is in community building, convening, training, research, and advocacy. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that we are doing. But let's see, in terms of like just starting off with the chat. So I'm going to pull up my chat box here, and if each of you can just kind of give me a shout out and let me know what organization you're representing and what community you're representing, just to make sure that everybody knows how to use the chat. And I'm going to try to see if I can get my presentation up here. So I think, Sandra, you need to enable me to screen share. And I'm not seeing any chat over there at all. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Okay. All right. Okay. Sandra, there you go. All right. Natalie. Okay. Oh man, I can't even pronounce that word, that city in Michigan.
It's Dowagiac.
I still can't pronounce it.
That's okay.
All right. Hey, Amanda, how are you? Okay, great. Okay. All right. So that was the first thing I wanted to ask you. And then the second thing I wanted to ask you is just kind of thinking about, so I'll share, and this is pretty interesting from a Michigan perspective. I had a chance to meet a bunch of folks from Detroit over the weekend. I attended a 25-year wedding anniversary that was outdoors. I've been vaccinated. And then I attended a graduation ceremony from a family that also had connections to Detroit. So I'm getting like my Detroit, Michigan thing going on here. And I'm sure, you know, my wife and I were looking forward to some kind of interaction, socialization. So I'm wondering, from the Entrepreneurship Center perspective, what are some of the things that each of you are looking forward to in the next 12 to 18 months? So if you can just kind of drop that in chat in terms of just kind of like, what are you looking forward to most from a professional standpoint in the next 12 to 18 months? That'd be fantastic. PowerPoint, can I do this? Okay, networking events. Yes, okay. All right, fantastic. So I am just making sure that I can share Zoom here on my computer. Okay, and then the last thing I'd like for you to share is share with me, like, so when you take a look at these things that you're looking to do in the next 12 to 18 months, what's your sense of things that are in the way? So what are some of the challenges that you're anticipating in terms of what you have to address in order to kind of recognize these possibilities? So what kind of challenges are you expecting? Click on log. Okay. All right, fantastic. Okay. All right, so I think I should be able to share a screen now. Let's see here. Can you see my screen, Sandra? Okay, yes, let me put it into full mode here. So unfortunately, I have to say that in terms of dealing with Zoom, I was doing fairly well with Zoom. So, you know, we have now done like 4 virtual convenings since the pandemic, and we were fortunate to not have any kind of major technical issues. But I think it seems like my luck has run out on me a little bit here. So just the context that I'm going to provide is just really share a little bit about what I'm seeing in the practice of entrepreneurship center management. So our membership right now is about 450 organizations, about 1,200 professionals, and we have members in just about every U.S. state. I think we're only missing about 3 or 4 states, and then over 32 countries. And the, you know, so while the majority of our members are pursuing a diversity of models. Most of these models are rooted in business incubation. And so the best practices that they're adhering to is really a programmatic approach to entrepreneurial support, community-centric approach that's really making sure that what you're offering fits into the needs of the community, and you have broad stakeholder support, and then that we're adhering to sound management practices and standards of professionalism. And then the other thing I like to do is, in terms of providing context of my comments, I'm going to just focus on kind of what I've been observing in the past 14 months. So let's go back to like March 2020, right before we kind of started into the pandemic, and really wanted to provide that frame of reference. And when I look back at 14 months ago, I remember March 19th was the day in which we had actually postponed our ICBI 34 for our event in Boston. And so this is the context I want to share my comments with. So shortly after we had postponed Boston, we did a survey to our members about how they were looking at the pandemic. And a couple of things that came out of that. One, while everybody was concerned about loss in revenues and loss of funding, only a small percentage of the community was really concerned that things were going to get bad enough where it would result in any kind of like layoff of staff or reduction of staff. And most of the concerns, and rightly so, was around converting to virtual programming. And so what we have observed in general is that entrepreneurship centers, and entrepreneurship center is a term that we use to be inclusive of all of these different models, that most of these entrepreneurship centers are fairly well positioned throughout the pandemic. I think that was because, number one, that many of the clients that we were supporting were not in the hardest hit sectors. So when you take a look at some of the research that we do in our surveying, many of our top industries would include information technologies, biotech, and professional services. And of course, the hardest hit industries were in hospitality, travel, leisure, and food service. But then the other thing, though, I think is that adherence to these best practices, I think, really served entrepreneurship centers well. And I think the best practices that probably stood out the most is, again, around having broad stakeholder support, and then also best practices around the structuring for financial sustainability and diversification of revenue. So this is just a little sneak peek of some insights that is going to be shared for our most recent collection of impact data across entrepreneurship centers. So we most recently concluded back in the spring collection of data for FY 2019 entrepreneurship centers. I hope many of you participated in that. We will be doing our next collection of data in FY 2022. And this gives us great information to promote the efficacy of the work that you're doing on a day-by-day basis. But this graph here shows the source of revenues and the distribution of VC revenues by source for entrepreneurship centers. And I know it's a little busy, maybe a lot busy, but the main thing that I will mention here is that there are 11 different columns, and these 11 columns represent the average revenue sources for entrepreneurship centers. And I think this level of diversification has been really important to just how our centers have survived through the pandemic. The other thing that this shows is, while that's been positive, something that we're tracking closely and we're concerned about is, if you look towards the middle of this chart from left to right, and you look at column 7, and that's a column that takes a look at the percentage of revenues associated with local funding from local municipalities. And then two bars over is the percentage of funding that's coming from state governments. And so this is something that we are closely tracking. Last year, about this time, many of states were projecting anywhere from a couple of percentage points to 30% budget deficits. And of course, knowing the funding that comes from local and state resources for our members, we've been very concerned about what impact that will have on the funding for our entrepreneurship centers. I'm pleased to share that the forecasts in deficits were not as dire as predicted, and that was fantastic. I think that for across the board, I think that the reduction in state revenues is about, I want to say a little less than 2%, but that still was significantly more than what was projected, right? So I think the shortfall in terms of projections is about 3.5% across the board. I think for the state of Michigan, I was reading that the state was looking at a couple of $2 billion shortfall in 2020, a couple of $1 billion of shortfall in 2021. So again, those shortfalls have not been realized to the extent that was forecasted because of unemployment not being as bad and the economy responding. But then federal support, of course, as you know, through the America Rescue Plan has been significant. So I think across the board for all states and local municipalities for FY 2021, there's a projection of about $225 billion shortfall. And there's about $300 billion that is going now to state and local municipalities for the American Rescue Plan. And I think in the next couple of weeks or so, that first tranche of funding is going to be making its way to communities. And then the rest will be over a period of time. So we are definitely encouraged by that. But the other thing that I am really encouraged by has been how our entrepreneurship centers have responded to this pandemic and have changed not only the way in which they're serving members, but have changed or entrepreneurs or clients, but changing who they serve, right? So many entrepreneurship centers have pivoted over the pandemic. Of course, everybody has looked at taking their programs virtual, but many have expanded who they serve to include mainstream businesses, entrepreneurs of color, and low-tech companies. So I'll give you a couple examples. So CIC in Boston early in the pandemic was specifically looking at how they can support corporate workers that were a part of their partners that they were looking to connect to their entrepreneurs, and how they can help those corporate workers in adopting to work-at-home models. The Industrial Council of Near West Chicago, and that's led by one of our board members, Steve DeBretto. They have both a makerspace and also a kitchen incubator. And they were working on pilots around food distribution relief and contact tracing. And then several of our members, and I want to say, I know Amanda's on the line. I thought I remember, Amanda, that you were talking about maybe how you could better serve some of the mainstream businesses in your community. And I know there's several other members have done that. And I think this is very important in terms of where I think the industry is moving and where dollars will be coming from to support our kind of efforts. One other comment I want to make about virtualization in general. So I think just this pandemic has been an interesting kind of set of data points around just the power of place and the power of space and supporting community. And I know for the years that I've been involved in business incubation, we've had this love-hate relationship with space. And know that in the early days, because it was so centric to our business models that, keeping the building full and revenues from rent, in some cases, would crowd out other activities or crowd out other values of supporting clients. And I think we've seen through the pandemic just how important space is in terms of community and enabling trust. Many of our members have talked about struggling with being able to replicate that in a virtual environment. I think the Zoom fatigue is real. And I predict that, we're going to see definitely a comeback in terms of spaces and places. And I think it'll continue to be a point of differentiation for our entrepreneurship centers as we move forward. So So last month, we just completed our 35th annual conference. And I love the conference because it's an opportunity to see what's on the mind of practitioners in this space. And each year when we do the conference, we have a chance to just to kind of survey the participants on what are their challenges. And I'm pretty sure this probably matches some of the challenges that you shared with me on the chat. So consistently looking at the past 3 years, the top 2 challenges have been around funding for clients and how can I do a better job at delivering programming for both companies and for graduates. And then we take a look at the third one. So historically, it's been mostly around funding for centers, but recently we've seen that mentoring and the needs of building a strong mentor network has also creeped up. And then lastly, we allow for our participants to write in other challenges that we don't have listed on the pull down menu. And I was just kind of looking through those challenges or those responses in preparation for today's session, and pulled out a couple of things that I thought was pretty distinctive. In both 2019 and 2021, we were receiving comments about just how do you differentiate yourself within a crowded marketplace and a crowded ecosystem. So I think that continues to be a challenge. And then in 20, serving rural entrepreneurs was something that was highlighted. Okay, so given what we're hearing from our practitioners, let me share a little bit about kind of what's top of mind for the leadership here at MBIA, includes staff and also our board members. So one of the opportunities that we've been thinking about for a while has been just what can we do to improve the process of entrepreneurship and specifically the process of entrepreneurship in the United States. So I'm sure many of you probably heard the stat around looking at the source of job creation and job growth over the past 20 years or so. And if you took out the impact that new businesses have, then in many of those years, we would be showing net negative job growth. And so clearly, of course, I'm preaching to the choir here. We all know about the engine. This may be less known, but here is an analysis that was done by the Congressional Budget Office. And I think it's about a couple of years old, but it's still relevant in terms of the trends around new business startup. And so you see I guess the line in black is new firms entering the market. So that's basically mostly who we're supporting. And you look at that 40-year trend, and it's not going in the right direction. So that's been something that we've been very concerned about. And what's interesting about this is that this has been pretty systemic and comprehensive across at least the U.S. economy. So this decrease has occurred in all 50 states and most metro areas, and it's been attributed to most industry sectors. So it's pretty pervasive. In addition to that, there was some other research that was put out in 2019 that specifically took a look at, okay, well, while we might be getting less new startups, what are we doing with the startups that are occurring? And this research was published showing that across ecosystems in 32 states, compared to what we've done traditionally, we're doing a worse job at scaling and growing those companies in a meaningful and a systemic way. Another area that we have been thinking about is, how do we increase this entrepreneurial capacity by allowing entrepreneurship to be available to all entrepreneurs, independent of race and ethnicity. And I am pleased to share some of the work that we've recently done in this space. And this is a playbook that we are announcing on diversity and inclusion. And we actually had a chance to, we've been working on this, for probably about 4 years or so. Many of you may have remembered some of our convenings when we started to have the early conversations about diversity and inclusion. Many of those conversations were pretty uncomfortable conversations. And over the years, I think we've become more informed about how to talk about these issues. We still have a lot of work to do. But this playbook really kind of represents moving conversations from talk to, I guess, moving the activities towards action. So this is a playbook. I'm gonna actually, if I can, try to put a link to this into the chat. But we recently released this. It is funded by JP Morgan Chase. It's one of 3 playbooks that we have. The first playbook was focused on increasing entrepreneurship for women. Second one was around developing entrepreneurship in emerging communities. And then this one is around diversity and inclusion. And this takes a look at 30 organizations and practices in 3 major areas. So one is around engagement and education, 2 around programming and culture, and then 3 around growth and sustainability. So hopefully I can get that onto the chat. But if not, you can access that through our MBIA website and on our blog, and you'll be able to get information on that. One of the main conclusions and takeaway from this playbook is that the case that this playbook was making a case that the entrepreneurial outcomes of entrepreneurs of color is really an economic imperative for our nation, and that we needed to be urgent in terms of addressing that imperative. Okay, so in addition to diversity and inclusion, we've been thinking about ways to promote the efficacy of entrepreneurship centers to key stakeholders. So when I think about that, I think about a couple of images I want to share with you. So here's a guy walking down, probably looks like it might be Manhattan or something with a bubble. And then let's see if this one, okay. And then here's an image of a bunch of pennies, but then a little shiny penny. So I stole these images from a presentation I made a couple of years ago. And this was when I was talking about the way that our industry had responded to the financial crisis back 10 years ago. And I remember that when we were going through that crisis and a lot of the recovery work that was being done at the federal level, our industry and many of our MBIA members, I remember we were engaged in a very important debate. We were engaged in a debate about the difference between an incubator and an accelerator and a seed accelerator. Wow, tons and tons of government funding was going to new entrepreneurial support organizations, and many of us did not receive that funding because we just really weren't involved in those conversations. We didn't have a seat at the table. Today, there's a similar conversation that's going on, and the conversation is around how entrepreneurship can be used in communities beyond just growing high growth, scalable companies. It's about how entrepreneurship can be used to leverage the intersection of community development, workforce development, and economic development. And we need to be speaking in that language. It's also, and all you need to do is just take a look at the descriptions of support that's coming out of the America's Job Plan and all of the dollars associated with incubators and innovation centers, and much of the attributes is around bringing diversity and inclusion to our various communities through entrepreneurship. So I think it's really imperative for us to be able to have a seat at the table and be able to talk about this. And a part of that is, being able to share our stories and sharing our impact to key stakeholders. So the last thing I'd like to do, and then just kind of open it up for any discussions and Q&A, is share with you just kind of what's new and what's next with MBIA. And so first of all, what I want to talk to you about is that each year as a team, we take a look at, in addition to just the things that we need to just breathe, things like blocking and tackling, just your core kind of objectives, activities for an operation. We look to identify a theme that we focus on for some period of time. It could be 6 months, 6 to 18 months kind of time period. And we look to answer the question of, hey, if we, outside of our operating objectives, we only do one thing, what is that one thing that we must do in the next 6 to 18 months? And so currently what we're focusing on is how do we build community? How do we build trust, social capital in the MBIA community so that the members in the community can learn from each other and exchange best practices. So, you know, a key underlying assumption there is that members want to share information, want to share expertise, and they have the expertise to share. And my experience has been over the years of working in this community that is actually true. So there's a couple of things that we're looking to do. And one I'm very excited about that we launched in fall of last year is our virtual support circles. So these are roundtable sessions that, and I have a little background. Let's see here. Okay, that's good. All right. So these are roundtable groups that we have. We have 2 groups that are active right now, 6 to 9 of Entrepreneurship Center professionals that will meet on a monthly basis to brainstorm on solutions to challenges that they are facing in exchange of peer learnings. And this is professionally facilitated by trained facilitators, and we're leveraging the methodology of the Edward Lowe Foundation. And both Sandra and Amanda are participants in 2 of our circles. And so we're really excited about that. We will actually be putting out a call for new members to the circle towards the end of the summer to start for our next cohort that's going to be from September to August. So be on the lookout for that. The other thing in terms of just kind of what's next, so our next convening is going to be our e-builders convening, and that is going to be in October of this year, or maybe November. We're still trying to finalize details on that. That is probably going to be a virtual event. It might have some in-person elements, but we're looking to finalize that within the next couple of weeks. Just to remind everybody, what we do on eBuilders is this is really focused on ecosystem building competencies for entrepreneurial support professionals. And I'm very passionate about this because as I talk about some of these major movements that are happening in our space, a movement that we've been working on for a couple of years, mostly through the Kauffman Foundation, is how we can better build our entrepreneurial ecosystems. And I've been very adamant in making sure that we as Entrepreneurship Center managers have a place in those discussions. And so eBuilders is focused on that. Each year we'll take a look at a particular community and we'll do a deep dive in those communities and see how Entrepreneurship Center managers are playing a role in the ecosystem. In the fall, we're going to be releasing more data around the Impact Index report that I mentioned. And then we'll also be embarking on our next major research effort, which is our compensation report. So I would encourage everybody here on the call to, when you receive our invite to participate in that, to do that, because ultimately this helps us to help you. Everybody says that they want to have this kind of industry information, but of course I got to tell you, it's like pulling teeth to get people to fill out surveys. We're trying to do our best to make sure that the surveys are digestible. And then in January, we're going to have our Advanced Leadership Summit. So we brought back the Advanced Summit this January, and this is really a very short conference, a one-day convening, but it's really focused on the needs of people, professionals who have been in the industry for a while and who have really focused on leadership. So be on the lookout for that. And then hopefully ICBI 36 will be in person, but I can't make any guarantees there, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that. I also want to talk to you about how you can help with some of these opportunities that we're talking about. So one is, to the extent that we can help you, MBIA can help you in any way, feel free to reach out and let us know how we can help you. And that's independent of if you're a member or a non-member. If you're serving entrepreneurs in a programmatic way, we want to know how we can help amplify your work. The other thing is, again, as I mentioned, when we put the call out for research, please participate in those research studies. And then lastly, we just invite you to contribute to the overall body of knowledge. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. So for our major convening, the ICBI, in the fall, we'll be putting out a call for proposals. And so we want to the extent that you have promising practices, best practices, we want to elevate those through our conference. That's probably the best vehicle to do that. Then in addition to that, we are really looking to pump up what we do with our awards program. So this year, we actually have tried something new with the awards, where we not only celebrate excellence, but we also use that as a way to exchange best practices. And Sandra was actually a guinea pig, and she did an excellent job with this. I think we had, I'm not sure how many presenters we had. It was over 15, I think, presenters. So these are all of our finalists for our various categories. And they each presented a couple of minutes on what they were doing and why it was innovative. And we did it in a rapid fire, very informative fashion, and everybody did a great job with it. So I really want to blow that up for next year. I want those sessions where you get a chance to see what those finalists are doing in those awards categories. I want that to be on par with the keynotes. That'll be the reason why you go to these convenings. I would also mention I was very excited about a new award that we identified this year. It's called our Excellence in Communications Award. And it's really in recognition of the need for us to just do a better job of telling our stories as an industry, and really trying to just recognize excellence in communication, social media, marketing, and all those types of things. So be on the lookout. I think this year it went out to 36 degrees north, which is an entrepreneurship center that's based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then the last way that you contribute to the body of knowledge is by becoming a member of MBIA if you're not members, and then actively participating in the community. So the last thing I wanted to do before we go into Q&A, I wanted to share with everyone, last year when we were going to virtual for the first time, we were fortunate to have 2 keynote speakers that did a great job with ICBI 34. And I think our keynote speakers for 35 were great too. But I remember the 2 keynotes for ICBI 34 was a guy named Joe Jaffe and then Michelle Royal. And they gave us inspiration about just this path that we were going to be following or embarking upon over the next couple of months. And they talked about just the role of entrepreneurship center managers as superheroes with superpowers. And they didn't coordinate their presentations, but they both talked about this. And they talked about the powers of optimism, innovation in action. They talked about endurance, inclusivity, generosity, and community. And I think that those superpowers are just like right on target for what's needed in our community. And I'm very excited about each of you exercising your superpowers, and anything that we can do as an organization to support you. We are behind you 100%. So I just really wanted to thank you for the opportunity to kick off your meeting, and really look forward to any questions that you may have.